Can't really slide. I can sort of slide. Hey y'all, it's Martin. I'm in the studio today and we're making a snacking pizza. This is a quick recipe, ready in a few hours, beautiful, tender dough. Come along for the recipe. All right, so let's jump in. This is the snacking pizzas. Let's get to the mix. 210 grams of bread flour going into the bowl. You know, we're using bread flour here because we are trying to get these, on the table in a relatively expeditious fashion, right? We want to get them on the table pretty quickly. And bread flour in less time will develop more strength. Bread flour has a lot of strength. We could gain strength through fermentation, but here we want to get things done. So we're using the bread flour. It's going to give us that beautiful strength that we want in a short amount of time. A little bit of sugar, a little bit of salt, and of course, we need a little bit of instant yeast. Get everybody in the bowl, just sort of stir to combine. Got some olive oil. Olive oil straight in. Olive oil is going to give us some crispness. It's also going to give us a little bit of tenderness, believe it or not. Oil will add a little bit of tenderness in addition to flavor, obviously. And I've got some lukewarm water going in, 152 grams. Don't forget, recipe link right down there in the comments. We're also, somewhere down here floating in the ether, there are some amounts for all of the ingredients, so you can bake along if you like to or if you prefer to. So everything in the bowl, stir it together. You could use your hand here. I like the handle end of a wooden spoon. So I'm doing two things here. I'm just making sure that the ingredients are well distributed. If there's a little pocket of olive oil in there, I'm making sure that that's sort of smoothed out. We're only really going to touch this dough one time. This is a dough that we're only going to fold one time. So it's important at the beginning of mixing that I get everything sort of not smoothed out, but worked, a little homogeneous. And really, at this point, there's not a lot of structure to it. If I try and stretch a piece of it, we're not really going to see much happening there. But like I said, through the power of bread flour, we're going to come back in 30 minutes and we'll give it a fold and you'll be able to see just how much strength develops just by resting. So get a bowl cover on there, put it in a nice comfortable spot to rise. We'll be back in 30 minutes to fold it. Okay, so we're back after 30 minutes and we're ready to check in and give the dough a little bit of a fold. The dough will be extensible, stretchy, beautiful. Look at that. Remember when we left, it was sort of ragged and not much happening? Already we have this sort of window painting ability of the dough. That's because of bread flour, like beautiful protein content and a high quality bread flour will do that. With a wet hand, I'm just sort of, giving a bowl fold. Bowl fold is really, just kind of like kneading in the bowl almost. To middle, outside to middle, working my way around until it basically won't tension anymore, until I have a nice, tight, cohesive mass. Looks beautiful to me. So I'm going to get my cover back on there and we're going to rest it for another 30 minutes and then we'll come back for the divide. Okay, so it's time to divide. It's been half an hour since we gave our bowl fold and now we can cut it into 4 pieces for your pizzas. I should have said this at the beginning, and I didn't. I should have given you a little bit of an advisory, and the advisory is that you're always going to want to double this recipe. Like 4 snacking pizzas, I can eat probably 2 of them. Tucker can eat at least 2, maybe 3. So let's divide. A little bit of flour on top of my dough. Remember, we're trying to get down the road here, right? We're trying to get some pizzas on the table in a relatively short period of time. So the dough is active, but not necessarily doubled in size. Maybe you need a little bit of flour on top just to make sure that when I go to cut it, my bench knife doesn't stick to it. I've got my scale at hand. Yes, you could divide this by eye and just try and do a really good, accurate job. I like the scale because if things are even at the divide, I know that they'll bake a little bit more evenly. So now what I'm going to do is shape them into rounds. And I want to make these nice, tight balls because this is going to become the pre-shape for the pizza, right? We're going to make these rounds and then the dough is going to relax for about an hour to 90 minutes, hour and a half. And so what I want to do here is give a nice round and quite tight shape, right? So the way that I'm going to do that is similar to a bowl fold. It almost looks like a bowl fold on the bench in that I'm stretching from outside, pressing to the middle, stretching from the outside, pressing to the middle, until basically the dough feels like it really can't stretch anymore. That's how I can make a tight round. The other way to do it is to make sort of a cage with your hand, and without too much flour on the bench, just sort of rattle it around inside your hand, pressing it just enough so that it adheres to the bench. That's how I would do it if, nobody were watching. I would round everything 2 at a time. So now what's going to happen is that I'm going to put a healthy amount of cornmeal onto the bench. And the reason for the cornmeal is twofold. One, it's going to keep them from sticking to the bench. And two, it's going to just add a little bit of a textural element to that bottom crust. We're not going to bake these on a baking stone or baking steel or anything like that. We're just going to bake them on a sheet tray. And so when I was writing the recipe, I was looking for ways to improve the sort of crunch of that bottom crust. And the way that we're going to do that is by having a little bit of cornmeal. And then what I'm going to do is take my pre-shapes, my little dough balls, and I'll put them over here. Give them some room to sort of spread out a little bit as they rise over the next hour to 90 minutes, hour to hour and a half. They are going to rise some. They're going to relax a little bit, and they might spread out just a little bit. The main thing here is that you've got enough cornmeal so that they don't stick to the bench. And the other thing is that a little bit of flour on top, because I'm going to cover them. If they rise and sort of hit my lid here, a little bit of flour on top will keep them from sticking to that. While these rise, go ahead and get your oven set. Also, take the time to get your toppings together. You're going to need a sauce, you're going to need some sliced mozzarella, and any toppings that you want to finish it with. We'll be back when these are risen to eat some pizza. All right, so these doughs have rested for about an hour and 15 minutes. Remember, there's a range, like 60 to 90 minutes. You basically just want to let them rise until they feel puffy and feel like they could be stretched, right? So I'm going to have a look. They look nice. I can tell just by looking at them that they have a very nice sort of puffy disposition. They look like they're ready to be stretched. So before I get to the stretching though, let's prepare this sheet tray. In this case, I think that having some oil on here is enough to increase the crispness where it meets the metal. And so, lightly floured surface, remembering that I do have a top and bottom to this dough. I do have some cornmeal on the underside, which is going to improve the quality of the crust. So I'm going to keep that cornmeal down, or at least when I get over here, I'm going to make sure I'm cornmeal side down. I'm going to get into the little dough piece here, and I'm just going to press with my fingers out to the edge, and I'm not touching that little sort of edge crust. I'm avoiding that. I'm pressing the air from the center out to the edge, leaving about a 1/4 inch border. Maybe it's up to like 1/2 inch in some places, but really I'm looking for about an even 1/4 inch ring all the way around. So I'm most of the way there. The final shape here should be right around 5 inches. If you feel like you're having a tough time getting stretched all the way out there, you can let it relax, cover them well, get that plastic cover out, let them rest on the bench for another 5 to 10 minutes or something like that. Or you can pick them up and just give them a little bit of a tug. The final shape here should be right around 5 inches. Pick my dough piece up and I'll put it on the pan. And I'm putting them on the tray in a slightly offset fashion because I want them to have an equal amount of space on the tray. So I've got some sliced mozzarella. I'm using that for 2 reasons. One, I like the amount of coverage that it gives me, and I'm going to put it on the doughs first. That's going to build this sort of like cheese wall between the dough that I want to be crisp and the sauce that's going to be a little bit on the wetter side, right? So I'm building this little cheese wall. The other thing that I like about it is that it's already sliced for you and it's pretty easy. These pizzas are really designed to be sort of a weeknight situation. And so I have this sliced option, which I think is really good. One of the things that I noticed as I was writing this recipe, and honestly, as I was eating it, was that the part of this that I loved as much as anything else was the way that sometimes the cheese would go over the edge and get sort of crispy where it sort of fried on the sheet tray. And so I wrote it into the recipe that one should have this cheese overlapping a little bit. And then for sauce, what we're saying is about a tablespoon. I'm like a person who likes a saucier pizza. So if you feel like you put a tablespoon on there and you're like, I think we need a little bit more, you could up that. Now, a little bit of pepperoni if you want. You don't have to do that. I'm going to put a couple pieces on. I think I'm going to do them on all of mine. Why not? And then just for a little bit extra, I'm going to just grate some parm on top. So my oven is preheated, 500 degrees. I'm going to start these out in the lower third, and I'm going to bake them for 8 to 10 minutes. Don't be shy about the bake here, right? If it's still blonde, it's not done. Go until you've got a nice sort of brown in spots pizza with bubbling cheese and cupping pepperoni. If it doesn't look delicious, it's not quite there, so don't be shy about baking to full color. So 8 to 10 minutes, 500 degrees, we'll come back and it's almost time to snack away. Beep, 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 beep. If towards the end of baking you don't quite have the top color that you're looking for, we did write a little note in the recipe that basically says you can broil them for a second, but just remember, if you're broiling, don't be walking, like stay at the oven, hang out there, otherwise you will burn them. So you don't have to, but maybe a little bit of parm. This is a good time to add your hot honey too. If you're like a hot honey fan, which I am, this would be a great time to add some of that, or just a little bit more parm, just for beauty. So let them cool for a second. Fortunately for me, I've got some that I pulled out just a couple minutes ago. Snacking pizzas. These are these delicious snacking pizzas that I wrote this year. I hope you enjoy them. I hope you make them. They're quick. It's something you can manage in the scope of an afternoon. But just remember to double that recipe. You're going to want at least 8 of these, I think. So cheers. Happy baking. Thanks for coming along, y'all. The recipe link is right down there below in the description.